Hey y'all, I am preparing to drive the Suburban about 1,000 miles across Nevada, almost entirely on dirt. But before I do that, I have one survivability problem that I really do need to address on the truck. Specifically, I talked to Kevin Stearns, who is the number 11 car in the 4400 class, and he runs a whole set of Triton race coolers. You guys might know Triton Race Engineering. They make a bunch of chassis. They made Kevin's chassis. But Igor has started making some oil coolers that you and I can buy. I gather maybe he's been at it for a little bit, putting them in the cars. But now you and I can get like this for power steering. These are what are called the mini coolers. I'm going to use one for engine and one for transmission. At least it's good enough for a race car, so probably going to be good enough for the Suburban. Maybe way too much for the Suburban, which is just right. So one of the things that I'm running short on is time, right? The trip is coming up here in just a couple of days, and I need to keep making some progress on what I'm doing for the Charger. But fortunately, while I don't have an employee, I do have, trusted partners at Tribe 16. That's Adam and Lance and Jeremy, and they just do exceptional work. They build actually pretty cool race cars and have worked with some of this same stuff from Triton, and it only made sense to give them a call. So Chris and I are over here, and we're going to stop in, say howdy, and make a plan.
I've brought a number of things to Tribe before. If you'll remember, they have revalved shocks for me.
Woo! Oh yeah, this one's emulsified. We got a pisser.
They actually just put in a set of 513s in the Suburban, so I should be able to turn my 40s a little bit easier. I trust them for the stuff that is either out of my experience or, in this case, I need to be able to do two things at the same time. And so I know I am super lucky to have good quality folks like Adam and Lance here at Tribe that I can lean on and be able to make faster progress on more than one project.
When you guys build a car, how do you think about oil cooler placement?
Right. We've moved them around, shuffled them around, depending on how the radiator's put together and stuff. We've actually taken them off in front of the radiator and moved them elsewhere just to take that the heat that's being put into the radiator in front of it, off of it. So the radiator system works a little more efficient.
I actually think that's a problem that I've got right now with those two coolers. Right. They're in front of the intercooler. So I have in my imagination this problem compounding where you got the oil coolers, maybe you got the AC on, then you got the oil coolers, then you got the intercooler, and then, last the lowly radiator trying to keep the engine happy.
It's a lot of stacked heat. Yeah, it all adds up. Yeah. So this will definitely help pulling that off of the radiator.
Okay.
Yep, 100%.
In terms of circuiting, do you agree or have any feedback on the idea of going to these first, then to the radiator, and then back to the?
We've built some Ultra 4 cars in the past where we've run an actual heat exchanger and a cooler of this scenario with a fan, and we've done multiple ways before and after, and really honestly didn't see much of a big difference.
Really?
Yeah. It's a lot of cooling that we were doing, so it worked efficient either way. So
thank you for taking this off my hands. I'm about to go work on the car now. So.
Meanwhile, back at the shop, I've got a lot of welding to do here on the front end of the car. Most of these are overlay plates. There's a reinforcement for a cross member here, but the overlay, like the top one that you'll see me put on, is all about giving a tube landing for the upper chassis of the car. Some others where I just want to be able to tie the frame a little bit, more together and give it a little bit better rigidity, encapsulate from the engine mount to the front cross member to the front part of the frame. This whole section of the car is hyperstructural based on how the suspension is going to be put together. And you can probably figure out where I'm going with that based on other suspension designs, but I'm not going to spoil the surprise for y'all.
When I'm doing these plug welds, one of the things that I have found that really helps is instead of going into the circle and trying to weld things circularly, I actually go from the center out in almost like a flower, like petals on a flower. And I build up in the center and drag that to the edge and keep coming back. That keeps the edges of the plug weld crisp and keeps me from having something that's kind of oblong, because sometimes you lose the shape of the circle, or at least I have in the past. So maybe that's helpful to y'all. here's what I was trying to get to, right? So I want to be able to connect the forward part of the frame to this engine mount and thus the rest of the frame. You can see the profile there. And have this frame rail still naked. So you can see I want to be able to tie this to this to this using that. That is the idea. So lots of welding ahead. Before I'll go into like a long weld session, whether it's the root pass to the finish, but if I'm gonna be trying to do my best weld work, I'll make sure that my floor, my bench, and whatever is immediately around me is clean. I don't like rolling around in metal dust. You guys will often see me using this, the number 12 flooding cup, and I do that on all of my cover passes. But if I'm committed to doing 2 passes, I'll, sometimes undo this guy for the root and go back down to a number 8, because I like to save gas, right? Argon's kind of precious. And if you burn a lot of it, or if you use a lot of it, it can get expensive. This takes 30 to 35 cubic feet per hour. This takes like 20, right? So that's a big deal when you're draining 150 cubic feet of argon like every weekend. That can add up. So save yourself on the root passes and use like a number 8 cup.
One of the important things to remember when you are doing 2-pass welds is that the first one always needs to be constant current, just a good fusion weld, following the rule of 1 to 1.1 amps per 1,000th inch of thickness. So for 1/8 inch material, which is 125 thousandths inches thick, I'll weld between 125 and maybe even as high as 140. But it is a constant current weld, right? Do not pulse on the first pass. You're never going to get really good fusion from a pulse pass. It's just not something that seems to come together. That's not just my opinion. That's what race car builders do. Now, on the second pass, pulse to your heart's delight. In fact, it's the best way to get the best looking welds. Everybody that you see that does like the perfect stacked dimes, look, either they're super duper talented, which those people are out there, or they are doing 2 passes and the second one is a pulse cap. Me, that's how I do it.
So this is definitely the maximum effort way to put this whole thing together with 2-pass TIG weld. Yes, you get a better, I'm able to get a better profile, and it's easier to do 2 passes when you've got all these different thickness materials. 063 chromoly, 083 mild steel, 120 mild steel, 120 chromoly. It's also beautiful, right? It's extra effort. It takes a lot more, time and attention, and I like the aesthetics of it. It's very much in line with what I'm doing on this car. But it is time for the second pass. 1 down, 1 to go. I like to do like a little, just a gas quench here halfway, just to make sure that I got good coverage for the weld as it's starting to solidify. So that means I'll do some of these longer welds in like chunks of 2 or 3. So with these now burned in, I can actually get to the part to where I can put in this whole front frame stub. You guys remember I built this a couple of months ago? I've always kept it loose so that I maintained access to be able to weld in these overlays here. And knowing that that was going to take a minute, and I was working on other stuff, now those are done. So these guys can live on. These are just standard 3/4 inch pipe spreaders, super easy to work with. And then everything here, I tolerate about 1/10 of a degree. 1/10 of a degree difference. There's not much more that you're going to get out of that little gauge. That's probably the error range. So it's just clamp it, and then we're going to tack it and keep on moving. So I'm going to go ahead and just tack this in all the way around. I took a cross measurement from the chassis to kind of a point over there on the frame horns, and it's off by a little less than 1/16 of an inch. Man, that sure is good enough for me. So I'm just going to go ahead and get this whole thing tacked and then start welding.
In a race shop, this entire car would have been built on a fixture table. And look, I'm not at that level today, but I did build the base frame and this front frame horn section on fixture tables. So I'm really just installing an already square and level extension onto an already square and level frame. Combine that with some patient welding, like not beating the tar out of it and welding it too hot or fast, and the assembly stays pretty square and level throughout.
theme of having like maybe too many projects, I get to come not just work on the car, but get some new parts. But also take a look at Chris fixing his truck.
Not fixing, replacing plastic clips that don't belong on a Raptor bumper.
Re-adhering the plastic cap to the bumper itself.
Yes. It's temporary, but it'll do.
Look, temporary becomes permanent in a hurry for each of us. So part of that is putting on like not just new parts, but new sheet metal. You've seen I've had a couple of quarter panels and fenders for the truck. Some of it's original. 1970 is a one-year only car, with the front end anyway. And I need to be able to do some basic repairs, but I don't really want to hack into actually a lot of sheet metal that is kind of somewhat valuable. Like that right there. Basically, that quarter panel up there on top of the Wagoneer, that's going to be my go-by. It is an original, new old stock, 1969 quarter panel, and I'm going to use that as a reference for the replacement quarters that we need to go take a look at. Quarters and maybe some other things too. Inside that big hunk is all of the sheet metal for the car from AMD. So AMD is supporting this build, right? They're sponsoring exactly what we've got for the rest of the build in terms of sheet metal. I've already bought a few things from them, but you know, you start building things like this and met some really nice people, and they were very interested to support it. So thank you to AMD for supporting this build by providing all of that sheet metal. What's in there? We're going to hold on to that for another day. I'm just going to tell you there is a lot of sheet metal in there from bow to stern, so that I can keep that quarter panel and my front 1970 fenders for references. But enough of that.
Because I've got one more piece of detail I want to add to this front frame.
1, 2, 3, 4.
These are overlays. I got them lasered at Syncet, and in this case, it's 125 chromoly over 083 mild in a truss profile designed to add some beam strength for what will be a vital part of the front suspension mounting. I'm welding this at about 90 amps and taking breaks to maintain a crispy edge on the overlay. Heat-soaked material just is not going to hold up. I've always liked these overlays. They do a ton of work without adding a lot of weight, and they're fun to weld, but looking back, I wish I had just machined this pattern into a slightly thicker rectangular tube than going through all of this effort to weld, as much fun as it is. I guess that's something I'll just have to do next time.
If you want to love, there ain't nobody gonna do it for you. Got to find your own.
It's ready for a bath in Seymour penetrant, so it is preserved for the next step of assembly and fabrication after I get back from the Power Stop Trail.
So it's a Sunday afternoon, and this is all done, right? Everything's welded, put together. And, you know, it's got all the detail that I like, and it's what I had in my imagination this whole time. Go back and look at the other videos, and you can see how I built the front frame horns, how I modified the cross member, and how all of this stuff kind of came to be. And it's so cool when you see it actually, you know, something in your imagination becomes real. But what I've got to be able to do now is just basically go and work on the Suburban. The cooler should be in. There was a big bit of snow blew through Nevada just this weekend. Funny, my dad texted me, he goes, pack more gear. So that's exactly what I'm gonna do.
But look, for me, mixing up projects keeps my creativity going. And this might sound odd, but there is a lot of Charger in the Suburban, and the other way around too. You know, for me, that's just kind of been the nature of multiple projects. I work really hard on one, maybe in this case, get some help and do two at once, and then I go work or use the other.
So the truck is back from the guys at Tribe, and I'm going to show you exactly how they put in those oil coolers. Here under the middle of the truck, just under the driver's seat, is where the engine oil cooler is mounted. They did a really nice job making some brackets and a little shield. It's actually really tough to shoot it here onto the truck, but hopefully you guys can see this. This is the shield that's going to be kind of like done. It's going to mount just under here, and I'll show you on the other side because that's where the transmission cooler is. You see that reverse shield or reverse scoop, however you want to call it, that's just to keep, you know, rocks from the tires from kicking up and, you know, banging the snot out of this otherwise very nice cooler. So I just pulled the shield off of this one so you guys can see. The fittings are nice and protected up on top. There is very tight clearance here in the bars, but these things would have to move up a whole lot, like they'd have to get into the body before they ever contacted this tank. And then the shield mounts right here and keeps this thing nice and protected from, you know, just junk and stuff that might otherwise be up on the tire. Here's a shot so you can see how this thing is actually really well protected by the sliders. I really like the placement of this power steering cooler. I still need to put some holes or airflow in the bumper to get the most out of this. I have to pull the coolers out from in front of, the old coolers anyway, out from in front of the intercooler and then wire in these things. So there's still a little bit more testing to do, but they're in and everything is good. I know that this is the right move. It's based in what people do on much harder use cases, like I mentioned Kevin Stern's Hammer's car. And quite frankly, that radiator opening just isn't that big. Now, that's a problem I'll have to solve another time. So thank you to Igor for providing the coolers for this episode. I'm gonna load up my social media with a bunch of photos so you can see exactly how they were installed. I think Adam and the team up there did an exceptional job. We kind of brainstormed, but they did a really, really nice work putting them oriented correctly in the place that I had in my imagination, and they're well protected. So thank you guys. And just so y'all know, like, I'm a customer at Tribe, right? So I just trust those guys to work on my truck, and I'm happy to support their business. This is one of those things where it's good to have those sort of trusted partners that you don't mind them touching your truck. I mean, you've spent a lot of effort up here, and you know exactly how you want to have it done. And when you find those people who share your work ethic and vision, man, that's handy. But you guys will see, like, I'm always throwing like built not bought on my posts. Let me tell you, that is not intended to drive a wedge between us as hot rodders, right? I paid to have things done on my Suburban while I did things by myself, by hand, here on the car. The idea is do things that are within your skill set and then continue to grow outside that. But if you need help, you should ask for it and you should get it. And we're fortunate that in this hot rod space, there are folks that are trusted and that you can go and count on. I'm glad to have Tribe in that circle. But I tell you what I gotta do next. I've actually gotta go prep a bunch of gear to go on this truck. But that's what we're gonna talk about next time. And until then, y'all take good care, okay?